I didn't react when my father called me a nobody. No anger. No defense. Not even a word. I just stood there and let him believe it. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is let people stay comfortable with the lie they created about you. For 30 years, my family thought they understood me. They labeled me, dismissed me, reduced me to something small enough to make themselves feel bigger. And I let them. Not because I was weak, but because I was building something they would never see coming. And when the truth finally showed up, it didn't just shock them. It exposed everything. So before I tell you how one birthday dinner turned into the moment my entire family realized who I really was, I want you to do something honest. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel like you didn't matter, leave a like. Not for me, for the version of you that kept going anyway. And in the comments, tell me this. What's one thing people got completely wrong about you? I read everything. And if you want stories that hit deeper than they should, subscribe. Because this one cuts clean, and it stays with you. Most people would describe me as forgettable. And that was exactly the point. At 32, I lived in a quiet apartment, wore neutral colors, and moved through the city like someone with nothing to prove. No luxury, no attention, no signs of ambition. Just routine. Just silence. But every morning before sunrise, I made decisions that reshaped entire neighborhoods. Properties changed hands, companies shifted direction, millions moved, quietly, precisely, under names no one could trace back to me. I didn't chase recognition. I avoided it. Because I learned early that visibility comes with expectations, and expectations come with control. And there was only one place where I had never had control. My family. Inside that house, I wasn't strategic or accomplished. I was Lena Carter, the daughter who never figured things out. The one compared, dismissed, quietly pitted. They never asked what I did. Never questioned my calm. Never noticed how little I explained. At first, it hurt. Then it became useful. Because the less they saw, the more I could build. That night, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting a simple black dress, I studied my reflection, not for approval, but for confirmation. They still had no idea. And in a few hours, I would walk back into that house, sit at that table, and let them prove it again. The only question was, how far would they go this time? My father, Richard Carter, built his life on one thing: control. At 70, he wasn't just wealthy. He was respected, feared, and obsessed with how the world saw him. Every deal, every dinner, every conversation was a performance. And in that performance, there were only two roles for his children. The son who reflected his success, and the daughter who didn't. My brother, Daniel, was everything my father admired. Confident, visible, loud about his achievements, even when they weren't entirely his. He inherited not just opportunities, but belief. The kind I was never given. And me? I was the contrast. The quiet mistake that made Daniel look better. The example used in conversations that always ended with disappointment disguised as advice. Why can't you be more like your brother? It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. My mother, Helen, never challenged it. She sat beside him, nodding gently, maintaining the illusion that everything in our family made sense. That I was exactly who they believed I was. And over time, they stopped seeing me as a person. Just a conclusion they had already reached. That night, as I drove to his birthday dinner, I already knew how it would go. The compliments wouldn't be for me. The attention wouldn't be mine. It never was. But something felt different. Not because they had changed. But because I had. And for the first time, I wasn't walking into that house hoping to be seen. I was walking in, ready to watch. The only thing I didn't know yet was what they would reveal about themselves when they thought I was still nothing. The dinner started exactly the way I expected, perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. Crystal glasses, controlled laughter, Conversations that sounded expensive but said nothing real. My father sat at the center of it all, absorbing attention like oxygen. Daniel mirrored him on the right, confident, relaxed, already playing the role of successor. And me? I was placed just far enough to be included, but not close enough to matter. At some point, Daniel started talking about a new investment, something vague, inflated, impressive enough to earn my father's approval. I listened quietly, recognizing the numbers, the structure, even the location. It was one of my developments. He didn't know that. But what caught my attention wasn't the lie. It was what came next. My father laughed, raising his glass slightly. That's what I'm talking about. Vision. Not, whatever it is Lena does. A few people chuckled. Soft. Polite. Safe. Then he added, almost casually, I don't even think she knows what she's doing with her life. No one corrected him. No one even looked at me. I felt it, not like a sharp pain, but something quieter, heavier. The kind of dismissal that doesn't explode. It settles. For a moment, I considered speaking. Correcting him. Clarifying. Ending the narrative right there. But I didn't. Instead, I took a sip of my drink and stayed silent. Because that wasn't the moment. That was just the first crack. And cracks, when ignored, have a way of spreading. The real question wasn't what he said. It was how far he'd go, now that no one was stopping him. The worst part wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. Lena, you've never built anything. You're nothing compared to Daniel. The room went quiet, as if waiting for me to protest, to cry, to prove him wrong. But I didn't. I just smiled politely, folding my hands on my lap, pretending the sting didn't exist. My mother glanced at me, guilt flickering in her eyes for a fraction of a second before disappearing under practiced calm. My brother smirked, clearly enjoying the affirmation of his father's judgment. Even my father's wife, my stepmother, leaned in with that knowing, smug look, as if this humiliation was a private joke she was sharing with the world. I had been standing on the sidelines of my own life for decades, labeled lost, useless, invisible. And tonight, under chandeliers and polished silver, it all unfolded like a performance meant to entertain them and reinforce their self-importance. Inside, a storm churned. The fire that had been quietly burning for years flickered, threatening to roar. But I held it in. Patience was my ally. Silence, my strategy. Because I knew one thing they didn't, humiliation is temporary. But truth, the truth is permanent. And as the laughter and polite nods washed over me, I asked myself, silently, carefully. How long would it take before they realized that the person they called nothing had been building an empire in plain sight? By the end of that night, I felt the weight of years pressing down on me, not just my father's words, but the decades of being unseen, dismissed, erased. I watched Daniel toast to yet another achievement, basking in applause that should never have belonged solely to him. I sat there, a ghost at the table where my existence had been minimized, watching my family celebrate a version of success that wasn't mine. It wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was loss of connection, loss of identity within the people who were supposed to love me. My reputation in their world, their stories, their eyes, meant nothing. My accomplishments didn't exist. My choices didn't matter. And yet, I wasn't powerless. Not really. My life outside this room was entirely my own. Every property, every deal, every contract, every silent triumph had been built without their knowledge. My empire existed. My freedom existed. But the irony cut deep, they had all the outward appearances of respect and power, and I had the reality. They thought they held the control, the prestige, the narrative. And in that moment, I realized something crucial: their disregard had been my greatest advantage. Because the very thing they believed made me weak, was exactly what made me untouchable. And as I excused myself from the table that night, the question settled in my chest. How long before they realized that the nothing they had scorned was everything they would never have? After the party, I went home alone. The city lights blurred through my apartment window, but even their glow couldn't reach the emptiness I carried. I sat on the edge of my sofa, letting the silence fill me. It was familiar, my constant companion when the world ignored me. The sting of my father's words, the smirks of my brother, the cold nods of my mother, it all echoed in that quiet room. I had spent decades absorbing these slights, learning to vanish while they lived loud in their illusions of superiority. Tears didn't come. Anger didn't explode. Instead, a deep, calculated calm settled over me. I understood something that no one in that family ever would: reacting impulsively only gave them more control. Silence was my shield, patience my weapon. I replayed the dinner in my mind, every word, every glance, every subtle mockery. Their arrogance, their blind assumptions, their certainty that I had no life of significance, it was all documented in their expressions. And while it hurt, it also revealed their weaknesses. They had underestimated me, as they always did. And in that underestimation lay my power. I whispered to myself, almost as a promise, they will see. But not today. Not yet. And in the quiet of my apartment, the question formed, heavy and deliberate. How long would I have to wait before the truth became impossible for them to ignore? That night, I made a choice, a decision that would shape the next 20 years of my life. I could explode. Confront them. Show them every achievement they ignored. I could scream my worth across that dinner table, demand respect, force recognition. But I knew that would satisfy only my momentary pride. It wouldn't change their pattern, their assumptions, or the world they controlled. Instead, I chose strategy. Silence. Patience. Observation. Every insult, every dismissal, every nobody thrown my way became data. I cataloged their arrogance, their habits, their predictable need to be validated. Every weakness they revealed, consciously or not, became a building block in a plan they could never anticipate. I didn't want revenge fueled by emotion. I wanted a vindication so complete, so undeniable, that it couldn't be argued away. I wanted them to realize their mistakes without me having to lift a finger in anger. For the first time, I felt something I had never allowed myself: control. I smiled quietly to myself as I traced the lines of the city outside my window. Each building, each property, each deal I had quietly accumulated was proof I was no one's nobody. And as I sat in that dim apartment, the thought formed, sharp and deliberate. If they think they have the power to define me, the question is, how long before they discover they've been living in my world all along? Years passed, and from the outside, it looked like I hadn't moved at all. My family continued their narrative. Lena was quiet, unsuccessful, and invisible. Daniel married, expanded his business under my father's approving eye, and lived as if the world belonged to him. My mother stayed silent, complicit, always reinforcing the version of me that existed only in their minds. But inside, I was unstoppable. Every decision, every investment, every acquisition was calculated, methodical, invisible. I built a holding company spanning cities, countries, continents, and empire that none of them suspected. I lived their illusion of weakness while quietly amassing power. Still, there were moments of doubt. Seeing Daniel celebrated while I remained unseen sometimes gnawed at me. The world seemed to reward visibility, not substance. And the idea that my father's judgment had shaped my entire life weighed heavily. Could I truly reveal the truth without losing myself in the process? Could I outmaneuver people who believed their assumptions about me were unshakable? I reminded myself, I wasn't building a spectacle. I was building inevitability. And deep down, I knew, when the moment came, they wouldn't even see it coming. But the question lingered in the quiet of my office, under the hum of city lights. How long could I let them believe they were winning, before the truth became undeniable? I learned more by listening than by speaking. From my quiet apartment, I observed them, the way my father measured approval, the way Daniel thrived on validation, the way my mother clung to her small comforts in their world. Every dinner, every gathering, every casual conversation was a window into their patterns, their weaknesses, their blind spots. I noticed how my father craved admiration but despised challenge. How Daniel's confidence crumbled when someone quietly outperformed him. How my mother's silence wasn't neutrality, it was fear disguised as calm. Even my stepmother's polite smirk revealed a hunger for drama she tried to mask. Each detail was a piece of a puzzle they didn't realize I was assembling. Every slight, every assumption, every dismissal became an opportunity. I mapped their behaviors, predicted their reactions, and stored it all carefully in my mind. Outside the family, I reinforced my empire. Every acquisition, every deal, every partnership moved silently under the radar. My world thrived while theirs remained focused on appearances. And yet, a question gnawed at me, an invisible tension I couldn't ignore. If they think they've seen the worst of me, what will happen when they finally realize how powerful I've become while they slept? The first move wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve confrontation, threats, or grand gestures. It was almost imperceptible, a whisper beneath the surface. I started by strengthening what they thought was irrelevant: my name hidden behind shell companies, my holdings spread across continents, my reputation known only to those who truly mattered in business. Every property, every deal, every contract was a carefully placed brick in a structure they could never see. Daniel bragged about a project in the city center. I already owned half the buildings surrounding it. My father celebrated deals I had quietly shaped, never realizing I was the force behind some of his most impressive successes. I smiled privately, letting them believe they were winning while I silently rewrote the rules of the game. They were predictable. Their arrogance blinded them. Their need for status kept them exposed. And all the while, I cultivated patience. Patience to wait for the perfect moment, the tipping point when truth would strike so cleanly that no denial could survive. The tension in my chest was constant but controlled, an energy that sharpened focus rather than consumed it. And as I reviewed my maps, my contracts, my spreadsheets late at night, a single thought anchored me. They have no idea what's coming. But the question lingered, almost mischievous. When will they realize that I've been playing their game better than they ever could? Just when I thought my plan was perfectly concealed, complications began to surface. A minor leak. A careless comment from a partner. A rival noticing unusual acquisitions. Nothing catastrophic, yet, but enough to make me pause. Every empire has weak points, and mine, though invisible, was not immune. For the first time, I felt the familiar calm waver. My carefully constructed silence could be exposed prematurely. If the wrong person connected the dots, the narrative could shift, and my family might sense something before I was ready. I spent nights analyzing every angle, rechecking documents, tightening every contract, reinforcing anonymity, and ensuring every transaction was legally untouchable. The weight of the empire I built alone pressed on me, but I knew the stakes: one misstep, one premature reveal, and the moment of truth would lose its impact. And yet, amid the tension, I realized something crucial: this threat wasn't fear. It was a reminder that control is never given, it's earned, maintained, and defended. I leaned back, staring at the skyline, whispering to myself. They think they can ignore me, they think I'm fragile. But the truth isn't fragile. And in the quiet of that night, the question lingered, sharper than ever. What will they do when the nobody they dismissed proves untouchable? To reach the moment I had envisioned, I had to let go of pieces of myself most people would never understand. Friends I had once trusted were quietly cut out, not because they were unloyal, but because loyalty often comes with exposure. Nights with family, fleeting moments of peace, even celebrations I might have enjoyed, all sacrificed to ensure my plan remained untouchable. Every distraction was weighed against the ultimate goal, a truth so undeniable that it would leave no room for doubt. I remember one evening, holding a letter from a partner who begged me to reveal part of my holdings for immediate recognition. The temptation was real: quick validation, public acknowledgement, an easy win. I smiled, folded the paper, and placed it in the shredder. That instant reinforced a lesson I had carried for decades: victories earned too quickly are often wasted. My empire had to remain invisible until the perfect moment. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of solitude was deliberate, strategic, and precise. And as I stared out my window, city lights reflecting in my eyes, I whispered quietly. They will never see it coming, and that is exactly how it should be. But even in that certainty, the tension remained, like a cord pulled taut. How long before their ignorance becomes their ultimate undoing? The night had come. Every calculation, every quiet decision, every invisible move led to this moment. I arrived at my father's 70th birthday dinner as I always did, calm, composed, unnoticed. The room shimmered with crystal, laughter, and self-importance. Daniel prattled on about achievements, my mother nodded, and my father basked in the illusion that he had shaped the perfect legacy. What they didn't know was that I had already orchestrated the stage for a revelation so precise it would leave no escape. Seated quietly, I allowed the casual insults, the underhanded comments, the dismissive glances, they were all part of the choreography. Each slight reaffirmed their assumptions, each laugh confirmed their arrogance. And then he arrived, the catalyst I had arranged without anyone suspecting. The editor from Forbes, an older man who had long admired my discretion and acumen, approached with a knowing smile. He carried proof, documents, numbers, and stories detailing 20 years of my empire. Every property, every acquisition, every contract, everything they had ignored, mocked, or dismissed, was about to be exposed. I watched their faces, anticipation simmering beneath my calm. They still thought they were in control. But control, I realized, was never theirs to hold. And the question lingered in the air, electric and silent. Would they understand what had just happened, before it was too late? The room froze. My father's laughter, Daniel's smirk, my mother's polite nods, all vanished in an instant. The Forbes editor began speaking, his tone calm but deliberate. Lena Carter, he said, is the owner of a holding company with over $1.2 billion in assets. Built entirely in secret over the past 20 years. A silence so heavy it felt physical pressed down on the family. Daniel's jaw tightened. My father's face paled, his eyes flicking between me and the documents he had never imagined existed. Even my mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her napkin, realizing her complicity in decades of oversight. Everything you believed about me, I said quietly, almost to myself, was wrong. And that's on you, not me. The editor laid out the proof, every property, every acquisition, every deal. Names, numbers, and timelines meticulously recorded. The empire I had built, invisible to them, undeniable to the world. Their whispers began, half denial, half shock, but I didn't respond. I let them sit in the revelation, let them taste the truth. Because the truth is never loud. It doesn't need explanation. It simply exists, and when ignored for long enough, it becomes unavoidable. And in that charged silence, one thought echoed in my mind. How long will it take them to realize that I was never the nobody they claimed I was? The next morning, the article went live. Forbes splashed my story across headlines, the billionaire they never saw, Lena Carter's secret empire. Within hours, the world knew what my family had refused to see for decades. Calls, messages, and emails poured in, congratulations, offers, respect. People I had never met treated me as a force to be reckoned with. I read every note, savoring the contrast between the recognition I earned silently and the years I had been erased by the people who were supposed to love me. Meanwhile, my father was a shadow of himself. The social circles he had curated, the status he had flaunted, the legacy he had believed untouchable, all crumbled in whispers of astonishment. Daniel's confidence faltered. Suddenly, the perfect son was just the sibling who had spent decades underestimating me. My mother avoided eye contact, carrying guilt she could no longer deny. Friends, colleagues, even distant acquaintances, who once validated their pride, recoiled as the truth became undeniable. Weeks later, my father sent a formal letter, requesting a meeting. I held it in my hands for a moment, reading his words carefully. And then I fed it to the shredder. Nothing remained. No reconciliation, no explanations, no validation. They had forfeited that right decades ago. I smiled quietly. My empire thrived, my freedom was complete, and I no longer needed their approval. Because the greatest victory isn't loud. It's silent, strategic, and inevitable. And as I looked out over the city I had built, I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. They spent 30 years calling me nothing, and in the end, I gave them exactly that, nothing. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button to show you appreciate the power of patience and strategy. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been underestimated or dismissed, only to prove everyone wrong later? I read every single story and love seeing your experiences. And don't forget to subscribe for more intense, real-life stories that reveal how quiet strength can change everything.